So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to the second of the replays that the Womb Raider sent to me. Now, I think these may have been a partially collaborative effort with Mevin, after being given one by Mevin as well, which had a very similar name to the last one that we showcased. I'm not entirely sure who's responsible for what, to be honest, but I'm pretty sure there was a lot of assistance being rendered both ways, so I don't really know. I don't want to credit just one person for the work of several people, but the Womb Raider is the one who sent me this replay, and was certainly had a hand in its creation, so we at least have that. Also, I think I am going to have to come up with names in the way that I usually do for these locations, because most of these are not real places, and this one certainly not. I want no part of the Mandela effect, where Sigma Town is a part of Middle-earth's landscape, but there we go. I mean, it is also, I can pull from the island of Numenor really, I think, for this settlement, because it is the Numenorians that are on the defence and the lesser kingdoms of men that are attacking them. So certainly the greed of humanity perhaps, but normally it is the Numenorians who succumb in a more spectacular manner than their more simplistic, shall we say, middlemen counterparts, albeit there are some elves here as well, because Dorwinion are among the attackers. This again is another cityscape, bigger than the last one in terms of the attackers' options, a few larger choke points. There's a little bit more verticality to this one, I would suggest as well, so possibly even more of an opportunity for archers to do their thing, albeit the Numenorians are maybe a little bit more defensive across all three of the factions on display here in terms of their archers, but we'll get onto that when we talk about the defenders. We'll go through the attackers first and foremost, starting off with a force which kind of struggles on occasion in siege battles, depending exactly on how they can go down. The Rohirrim are here, played by Sevapi 500. We have got the Red Shields of Erkenbrand, who are a melee cav combined with a horse archer unit, heavy horse archers as well. I mean, to be fair, there's enough open space on this map that cavalry should be pretty useful for map control. It will limit what the Numenorian defenders are going to be able to do, but obviously there are some more fortified areas as well where the cavalry might struggle a little bit more, but we've seen many instances of cavalry like this being very effective on siege maps as long as it's used at just the opportune moment. And the Sons of Aeol, of course, Lance Knights are always going to be a really devastating weapon that you can utilise. We also have the Dwarven Catapult, so the Dwarves of the Glittering Caves are here with the same catapult, I believe, that they share with Erebor. But yeah, effectively a standard catapult, a slightly bigger unit model actually, which can make it a little bit more unwieldy to use. The crew themselves, however, are also some of the more heavily armoured units that Rohan can field, so that's a nice little bit of trivia. We've also got the Helmingas. I mean, the counter-skirmishing from the attackers is going to be an important part of their arsenal here, because certainly the Numenorian faction and their inheritors are all pretty damn good when it comes to outlasting the opposition when it comes to arrow fire. Rohan may be the least among the attackers today of those who can answer that with an equivalent unit, but the Helmingas won't do too bad in that regard. They're also pretty good in melee as well. And then we've got the Westmark units. I mean, the Westmarks are good. They lack maybe the really heavy armour of some of the other Western kingdoms, but in spite of the fact that they also have a slightly lower unit count, individually speaking, they're of pretty high quality. The Westmark Spearmen, perfectly adequate defensively, won't go down easily, even to Numenorian pressure. And then the Westmark infantry are going to be more well suited for trying to go toe-to-toe with some of the Numenorian infantry as well. They may struggle against Numenor themselves to fight evenly, but they will give at least a decent enough accounting of themselves, potentially, for some of these supporting units to do their thing. The Shield Maidens, ever a really important unit for Rohan. Those throwing axes and the damage they can deal could be very, very vital for the attackers' chances here today. And then also the Westmark Marshals. I mean, armour piercing is also going to be a big deal for the attackers, and in fact, I mean, among the attackers, Rohan should really have the most of the armour piercing here, the lion's share of it at the very least, in melee. So, I mean, we'll see how the Westmark Marshals can cope. And then, of course, you've got the Javelins as well, the Medicel Guard, who are also very strong weapon and shield. I was going to say sword and shield, but some of them do wield axes. Units of bodyguard infantry in the game, a very fine hybridised unit there. Moving along, we have White Dolphin, who's playing as Dale, the Earls of Dale, another cavalry unit that can be used to try and seize a bit of territory. Not quite as impressive, perhaps, as the cavalry that the Rohirrim can field, but they're just going to be here to try and secure the position for the mounted units for the attackers here and sort of muck in that regard. We've got the Dalian infantry, who again are decent, not quite as strong as the Westmarks, but there are more of them. So there's that. But one thing that Dale certainly can do, even more so than their Numenorian counterparts, is win a skirmish fight with their heavy archers. The Bardian marksmen, especially with the armour upgrade here, are going to make life very uncomfortable potentially for defending archers, so they are actually going to have to rely more on terrain than you would expect the factions on the defence to normally do so. And then you've got the slightly less impressive but still armour upgraded Dalian bowmen are not the easiest to get rid of by enemy archers either. We've got a couple of units of the River Patrol, so more armour-piercing skirmishers. Again, Dale don't have as much armour-piercing in melee or aggressive armour-piercing in melee as Rohan do, so every little bit of this is going to be useful because all of the defending factions will be reliant on their armour to a certain extent. The Barding Herd are more of a defensive unit of armour-piercing infantry, but still going to be vital if they can get onto the front line and anchor the attacking formations in place. The main issue with these guys is they're going to be one of the first ports of call for some of the more dangerous skirmishes the defenders have, you would imagine. So again, timing could be pretty key there. We've got another unit of Earls of Dale out in front. The Dalian Paladins are a bodyguard unit of armour-piercing infantry, which is very good. They may be limited in number, but they will also be one of the more terrifying opponents for the defenders to have to try and deal with. And then you've got the two units of bodyguard archers, the more defensively minded Dalian Royal Guard, and the far more aggressive Blackshot Dragon Slayers with those Wind Lances. Now then, moving on to the first of the Dorwinion armies, played by Zelhain. We've got Morroquendi Bows, of course, a faction with plenty of elven influence to them as well. Certainly they would have their opinions on what the island of Numenor became. Poison arrows as well. I don't know necessarily how that will... I mean, there is one faction on the defence which that will certainly be useful against late on, perhaps. Obviously, elven archers have got their extra damage as well, but there are fewer of them, and the Morroquendi don't have the best armour values, so unlike Dale, they're not really designed for a bit of a back and forth with defending skirmishers. We'll see how they get used though. Elvelyn Vineguard, very well armoured. Obviously this is where Dorwinion can be very useful for the attackers here, because their armoured units are very, very adequate when it comes to outlasting the enemy in melee on many occasions. Maybe not so much against the higher quality units of the defenders here, but they can certainly do a job, especially with their superior stamina and that armour of theirs. Or River Patrol, of course, a unit they share with Dale. It used to be called the Keldrin River Patrol, and they could have kept that name because both Dorwinion and Dale are on the banks of that river. We've got the Morroquendi Glade Masters, a dual-wielding unit, very, very scary. I mean, in terms of the melee defense, finesse-based bodyguard infantry, I think they would probably be the best on the field, melee defense-wise, even if we see the Pharazim Swordmasters, so they have that going for them. And then the armour-piercing as well of the Elvelyn Hammerguard, more armoured and shielded, of course, but lacking the very high melee defense that the Glade Masters have, so that's the trade-off there. And then several units of the Elvelyn infantry, so more swordsmen. Again, that armour, those shields, going to be important when it comes to making those initial gains. One unit of Morroquendi pikes at the back as well. We'll see how they get on when it comes to potentially the late game based on their positioning. Then the Warlord, another Dorwinion army here, so another unit of Morroquendi pikes. He has opted to bring the Morroquendi Glade Lord, so again in much the same way as the Sons of Yall, very, very deadly unit of lance cavalry, something else which they can use to try and really claim all of the open spaces on the map and really pen the defenders in. Several units of Elvelyn infantry and Vineguard as well, which is unsurprising when you're on the attack as Dorwinion. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to go full elves with them. You want to be leaning on the armour of the Elvelyn a little bit more. A couple of units of River Patrollers, some hidden units here potentially as well, which could be the Horse Archers for Dorwinion. They're one of the units that can hide for them. Then a couple of units of Morroquendi Bows and more Elvelyn Hammerguard. So if we're going the foot-based Elven unit for the cavalry-based one instead. And then the second of the Dalian armies under Bosnian Populator's name. What command, what a name that is. We've got the Dalian Spearmen, several units on the front line, and then more Dalian infantry as well, and Dalian bowmen and Bardian marksmen as well. So unsurprising to see the full contingent of heavy archers over here again with those armour upgrades, and once again 2 units of River Patrol. The main point of difference here is maybe slightly lighter on the Barding Herd, and also no Dalian Royal Guard, although they still have the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, and instead bringing some Dalian Swordmasters instead. So a little bit more in melee, sacrificing a little at range, but of course when you're on the attack you do need numbers when it comes to trying to flood forward in melee, so that does make a certain amount of sense. For the defenders, plenty of ways in over here. You've got some of the bridges, and then you've also got the high ground over here. So we've got Hertumihai, who's playing as Cardolan. Obviously, morale-wise, they do lag behind a little bit their brethren today, but they have certain things going for them which make them a fairly indispensable ally. Hearthguard of Amon, Sul and Cardolan archers are all well and good, especially the bodyguard tier variant, because it does allow them to have that back and forth with Dale, although even then, maybe it's not a fight they'd want to take straight up in this sort of location. They might want to rely on the terrain of this area a little bit more. The Tollkeepers and the Greenway Footmen are a very cost-effective front line in this sort of situation, especially considering Dale. They've got solid infantry, but not the most damaging infantry, and this is the sort of front line which can bottle them up for quite a long time, that being the case. And then you've also got some of the more high-ticket units like the Wardens of Tir Gorthad. Obviously the Tharbad Warhammers, very, very deadly with that armour piercing of theirs, but it's the crossbows, I think, where Cardolan are really going to earn their keep among their brethren today. Cardolan sharpshooters, they've got that little bit of armour piercing in melee, but the stopping power of those bolts is going to be a problem, and Dale can't really skirmish with them as easily, although, having said that, I don't think Cardolan would want to use their bolts on archers either. More Greenway Footmen and Tharbad Tollkeepers. We do have the Royal Court House Thorondor here. They do not have an anti-cavalry bonus either. They are pretty much entirely a sort of block of armour that's designed for barreling into enemy infantry lines. They might find it a little bit difficult. I mean, if they're only dealing with Dale, that's one thing. If they have to deal with some of the Dorwinion cavalry, that might be another matter entirely. We've got the Gatekeepers, so the higher tier variants of the crossbows here, up on this hilltop as well. And then another unit of the Gatekeepers, so dipping into the red limit, but obviously in a 3v5, that is something the defenders can and need to do, really. Yeah, more crossbows, Cardolan sharpshooters. Tharbad Tollkeepers also coming across to help defend the middle, along with some more sharpshooters, so yeah, heavy onto the crossbows. Moving on, their sister kingdom in Arthedain under Hidden's command, we've got the Arthedain Spearmen, as well as some Arthedain men-at-arms as well with the armour upgrades. So again, dependable infantry, and that'll be fine against the Elvelin, but if they have to deal with a bit of elven quality, and obviously in sheer numbers terms, they are going to have to really earn their keep here as well. Arthedain marksmen, more defensive archers, but not necessarily the worst thing against the forces of Dorwinion. Then moving on, we have more units down here. Defenders of FOROSTAR are a good choice of unit, I think. Gives them a little bit more damage on the front lines, while not compromising too much in terms of their defensive nature with their armour. We've got some Arthedain Spearmen, more archers. Interesting they've gone for more armour upgrades with their infantry compared to their archers, but then perhaps that's necessary to just give their infantry that little bit of extra staying power. 2 units by the looks of things of the Wardens of the North, so they will be able to match up with the 2 units of black shots spread out across the 2 Dalian armies. We've also got the Knights of Numenor. Now this is a unit which does have that extra bonus against cavalry, so very much in the same category as the Sons of Aeol and the Morroquendi Glade Lords, but of course, again, depending on how they want to play this, they may want to save them for later instead of sending them out early. Arthedain Pikemen are always going to be a big part of an Arthedainian army as well, of course, just to help give them that little bit more solidity on the front. And a Trebuchet as well, a Trebuchet of Numenor, fighting on home turf today. Plenty of scope to retreat further back into the settlement as well, potentially. And then last, but by no means least, we have the Womb Raider himself, who's playing as Numenor. Ardenaim Shadowbows, we may of course see some Dunedain Rangers and the like from the other factions as well, but they will be hidden. Naru Royal Guard, very heavy archers, defensively very sound as well. If anything, I mean, Numenor are quite safe when it comes to skirmishing with enemy forces as well. It just might be the sheer number, and considering Dale, that's central to their nature. Again, they are going to have to rely a little bit on these high positions just to try and mitigate the numbers disadvantage that they're up against. Nara and Aru Sentinels, so some very high tier pikes. Shield Guard, Steel Bows, obviously lower ammunition but very high damage. Yeah, we've got more Steel Bows and obviously the Cohort and the Shield Guard as well. It's not too surprising to see this sort of composition. Plenty of quality, and if they can rely on narrower sections like this, that quality will certainly pay dividends against the more basic units among their foes. We've got the Lords of Anadune, so each defending faction has got 1 unit of cavalry. I mean, it would be an interesting fight between the cav forces, but I think the attackers would have the edge, especially if, as I suspect, Dorwinion have got a couple of units of horse archers hidden under wraps. So again, it may have to be a bit more of a cautious approach, but we'll see. Cavalry, it comes down to equal parts, well, it's more a matter of personal use of the cavalry which determines how effective they can actually be, and a little bit of luck depending on where you've sequestered them when certain opportunities present themselves. Seafarers of Niandamos, Then we've got the Pharism Swordmasters as well as, of course, the Royal Legion. So all of the very finest there. I'll make a little bit of a cut because I think, you know, the river isn't really going to come into things. The attackers will manoeuvre their way into position across there and then start to try and advance into this rather wide open settlement. We shall see how this develops. But yes, I'll rejoin when the battle's about to get underway. So not too much of a preamble actually. The attackers have sprinted their way into position pretty fast, and as you would imagine, it has opened up with a bit of a back and forth with the skirmishers, which again, neither side is going to be too concerned about that for the time being. Dale will be all too happy to engage in this sort of warfare. But I think longer term, the defenders are going to want to try and avoid this as much as they can, because they'll need their ammunition for dealing with the vastly superior numbers that the attackers have in a 5v3. Though perhaps their great hope on this side of the map anyway will be bound up in those crossbowmen. Over here, meanwhile, got the Arthedain shadow bows, so rangers, and it's going to be difficult for the attackers to be able to return fire on the rangers as they're sat on top of these cliffs, so they can pick and choose their targets to a certain extent, and they are going after the Barding herd, whose shields they wear on their backs and the thick armour that they do have will mitigate some of that damage. When you're talking about rangers, of course, that is still a very high number, and of course the steel bows will cleave through the armour anyway. Orange shield guard, I mean, there is more than one approach, so again, very steep this angle of attack for Dale, and it'll be Rohan that are following them in as well, but not too surprising to see Dale's infantry take the lead because they're more numerous and more well armoured as a general rule than the Rohirrim are. Meanwhile, you have the Dorwinion Elvalin Vineguard who have moved forward a little bit further ahead. You can see some cavalry units actually did try to sally forth and it didn't really work, with spears screening the way and then also some skirmishers in behind. It was never really going to be terribly effective, but of course there is a pretty nasty crossfire set up here. Nothing worth attacking the enemy over for at this point because the numbers aren't there, but volume of kills is going to be a very important thing, albeit a little bit exposed up here perhaps, so the attackers could try and do some counter skirmishing, especially considering it is sharpshooters that are here. I do like the emblem of Tharbad on the Cardolan shields. Very cool indeed. They are going to open up already. I mean, again, they may be relatively basic, but each one of these bolts is extremely likely to result in a kill. We'll see though. Those crossbow bolts are going to be a very valuable commodity as the game goes along, you would suggest. Alien spearmen moving forward, catching the Cardolan archers off guard, perhaps seeing that they were manoeuvring their crossbows elsewhere. The infantry does move forward. Quickly they're going to be able to retreat, but still every kill they can score, the attackers here, in this sort of fight, is going to be very good for them, you would suggest. Again, they're not quite as low on numbers per army as the elves might be, but in a 5v3 you're outnumbered by such a great extent that it's still going to be very difficult for you. Meanwhile, alien bowmen on the bridge. Defenders not too interested in moving forwards to make this two smaller choke points. They'd rather defend just the one. This bridge as well, they do have the opportunity to get some good hits with their well-positioned archers. Here, meanwhile, still a relatively... I mean, they sprinted their way into these positions pretty quickly, the attackers, but now things have cooled off a little bit in terms of the pace, and that's a good thing, you would think, for the defenders, provided they can pick and choose their targets. And again, the Numenor Sentinels, or Numenor Royal Guard, I should say, and also the Lords of Arthedain, I was going to say, the heavily armoured archers are not the most damaging, so going after the river patrol is not the worst things. It deprives Dale of their javelins, and also more high damage projectiles can be used on hardier units, and the Royal Guard are also damn useful as a melee combatant as well. And the Lords of Arthedain taking hits from the supporting archers. They did manage to get a little bit of a charge off, but probably not anything too significant. Lost one of the or two of the riders actually as well to the Bardishes of the Barding herd. Cohort and archers going to go down this way instead, so looking for those gaps with the cavalry, which is fair enough. Surprised they're surely they're not out of javelins already. Don't think they've even been utilised yet. Meanwhile, Zelhain's force, I mean, this choke point is the furthest back within the settlement that any of the attackers can reach right off the bat, but that's not necessarily too significant. Again, the reinforcing between the defending armies is going to be interesting because it's quite a big and sort of not open settlement in terms of a lot of room inside, but there's a lot of ground to cover if you are going to try and reinforce your allies. So that does require a bit of foreplanning from the defenders if that's what they end up needing to do, and there's an inevitability in sieges like this that does turn out to be the case. Just in time to see Dorwinion get into their first melee scuffle. Elval infantry up against Arthedain spearmen. The infantry should have the edge there, even in terms of numbers, but of course that spear malice up close should give the edge to Dorwinion in a pure melee sense, but you already saw, especially with Cardolan sharpshooters, this is going to be not a fun time for the boys in purple. Although, blank firing, I guess they are. It's not necessarily the most important engagement anyway, and some reinforcements from any unit would tip this fight the other way, you would suggest. High Lords of Numenor, another... I mean, they could have set up a crossfire here as well, but there's only so many areas that they can defend, really. Arthedain marksmen, very tired having sprinted up onto that vantage point, but it's a very advantageous one to shoot in here. It's a bit of a big area for this Arthedain box to manage. If Dorwinion come forward with all their numbers quickly, they could smash through here, especially considering there doesn't seem to be any really deadly skirmishers nearby. Numenor, a little bit more condensed as an army than they need to be. They are the smallest fighting force of their kin. Dalian bowmen firing at point blank. I mean, to be honest, this is probably a good thing. I mean, from the front, of course, this Numenorian plate and the shields are going to mitigate an awful lot of that damage, but again, in a 5v3 you can afford to do this sort of thing because any kills you score just widens that numbers gap, and that can become something which is insurmountable in the late game if it gets too significant. And of course, all the Dalian archers have got some utility in melee as well. Maybe the Dalian bowmen less so, but they're not defenceless in that regard either, so they're still going to be useful later on potentially. Again, there are more units where that came from, but they won't be too disappointed by that. Still, the only active melee engagement really is this one, and the Elval infantry now taking hits from the sharpshooters. No reinforcements required as yet. Then sharpshooters just manoeuvring around in position, trying to get the best shots. I mean, every volley from these units needs to be well thought out and on point. The Dorwinion variant of the River Patrol standing ready to do some damage. And it's mostly rank and file units from Cardolan and Arthedain over here, so certainly not as scary as the Numenorian force on the other side, at least initially. Again, decent hits, just depriving Dorwinion of some of their numbers, but again, it would be too sad about the Vanguard taking those hits. Zelhain has got some of his units still back across the other side of the river. Not entirely sure why. Dale with the same, but Dale is still engaging, whereas Zelhain's army is still waiting, biding its moments. Rohan actually taking the initiative with their spears up front, the Westmark infantry as well. And the Westmark spears, as we mentioned, are pretty good individually in terms of quality, but they're not on the same level as the Numenorian equivalents. Spear on spear. did mention as well that the Rohirrim don't necessarily rely on their armour in the same way as many of the other kingdoms of men do. But nonetheless, that little bit of armour piercing that the Shield Guard do have will still come in handy against the Westmarks in particular. There's also Westmark infantry just there, but another unit of spears and cohort. But now that the battle is underway, we do have the artillery from Rohan as well. Grazing blow on the steel bows only, but statement of intent, if the Dwarven Catapult is starting to open up, it's a sign that surely the attackers are going to be turning up the heat a little bit. Daly and Bowman from White Dolphin going to be moving in support, but we're going to need more on the front line again. This is one of those situations where you see how stretched out the reinforcements are, and you do get a little bit concerned that these attacks have got a little bit more of a chance to fizzle out. Bardian marksmen on the way forward, so they're going to pressurise this angle as well. They are barding herd with the out of ammo river patrol. Shield Guard, I mean, they have taken damage at the hands of those archers and the dregs of that javelin unit, so can they get that momentum going? Shadow Bows going to be doing their best to get as many kills as they possibly can while this is ongoing. 7 river patrol who are wavering, of course, but yeah, victory seems certain for the Numenorians on the front line, to the surprise of no one, I'm sure. Meanwhile, the javelins trying to get into the view of the enemy so they could throw some of their projectiles in, but immediately the cavalry wasn't going to allow that to be the case, and you can see that already the front and second ranks and third ranks really of that unit were trampled by the mighty knights of Arthedain. Again, those spears needed to be a little bit closer if this was going to be the idea, because then you could retreat behind them. There was already an off-camera example of the Arthedain knights not necessarily getting the good end of an engagement like that. I mean, the javelins have done some damage to them. A couple of them did fall, but huge amount of kills there from the river patrol, and it will allow the infantry to remain safe for just that little bit longer. Daly and Bowman reloading. What are they going to be firing at? Trying to get some hits over here. I mean, this is a pretty dense position for the Cardolan units, and indeed they are managing to get some hits. I mean, the Hearthguard will take those hits all day long, but the few pikes that were sticking out the side, even with the armour upgrade, they're still basic pikes at the end of the day, so any arrow that hits them is extremely likely to result in a kill. Just over the hill, still got the continuation of that small engagement that did start between the two clutches of spearmen, but Dale have the numbers advantage by 1 here, by 2 here, so surely now in 2 separate 2v1s, now a 4v1. The Dalians should have the edge there. In the engagement that's happening just next door, however, continuing intent being showed by the Warlord and his advanced parties of Elvelyn, and again this is a little bit of an oversight. The Tharbad Tollkeepers not far enough forward to prevent the Elvelyn infantry and Vineguard from being able to engage with the Cardolan sharpshooters up close. Again, we did mention how important these crossbows are going to be overall for the defenders' chances of victory here. Those maces will help them in melee against the Elvelyn, but yeah, this is going to be pretty significant, and Tumihai has not noticed this, otherwise surely there would be more movement happening. I mean, Gatekeepers are getting into position now, and Thieves of Tharbad as well, so that's a lot of damage, but again, the Tharbad Tollkeepers still in loose formation, so they're going to be ill prepared for dealing with the Elvelyn infantry as well. Forward come the River Patrol. The Arthedain men-at-arms still biding their time as well. That advanced party of spears was doing quite well with the assistance of those crossbows, but that's not necessarily going to be the case now. There's Elvelyn. They've done a really good job actually of swamping those sharpshooters quickly, because if they did that more slowly, the Arthedain marksmen and the reinforcing Thieves of Tharbad would have been enough to turn the tide in that engagement, but again, squashing one of those units of crossbows, how important will that seem when we get to the late game? trying to use Flaming Shot, but the Elvelin are made of pretty sturdy stuff, so I don't think they'll flee in the face of that too quickly. However, the Royal Court of House Thorondor, one thing that we did think, or I thought certainly, was defending cavalry would probably find it a little bit difficult considering what the attackers had brought, but charges like that will certainly help. I mean, that definitely changes the balance of power in this engagement quite substantially, because they're going to be able to squash this one unit of infantry fairly fast, and River Patrol reloading at point blank. So things are certainly developing quickly here. It's more of a bump than a charge though, but still at this point that might be enough to rout these units. They're already wavering after all. They save any of those sharpshooters. I mean, at this point the Warlord has committed enough forward where really the rest of his army should be following through on this, and his allies should be doing the same across the field, which indeed they are doing so, or at least attempting to do so. That initial wave of Rohirrim infantry has been dealt with, but the Danians are just in behind, and we did mention they're a little bit tankier in this sort of engagement, albeit they're still going to struggle against that sheer Numenorian quality. Stuff like the Royal Legion of Armenelos will certainly help, but there's still more Rohirrim here, and stuff like the Shield Maidens. That sort of damage. Will Numenor be able to hold up against this? It's an interesting mix of factions, Dale and Rohan. Certainly on the open field I feel like they'd be a potent mix because of that Rohirrim cavalry combined with the solid position of the Dalian skirmishers, but both of them have got downsides when it comes to attacking in a siege. Will their damage be enough to overcome what the Numenorians have? I mean, the cohorts are holding on and it says victory seems certain, probably as a result of the support coming in from the archers across the way, to be honest. More infantry as well. The Earls of Dale could try and sneak their way through. If they manage to do that, then that could cause a bit of havoc. Pharazim Swordmasters. One thing that is apparent, I think, is the fact that the Bardian Marksman's enhanced abilities in melee compared to pretty much every other heavy archer from the Kingdoms of Men anyway, this more defensive style of skirmisher, is really going to be helping in this sort of situation. They must have used their ammunition as well, otherwise I doubt they would have been pushed forward this early. So any damage they would have done there is a little bit of a bonus, but yeah, the Barding Herd as well, going to be doing nicely on the front line. The Naru Sentinels have taken a fair amount of damage, so they must have been the target of, even though they are very heavily armoured and shielded, they're still a good choice for archers if you can hit them cleanly. And of course the Shield Maidens as well. The Westmarks taking a good amount of damage on the approach. Those axes are going to be pretty depleted by the time they get into melee. Rangers joining the fray as well as steel bows. I mean, the Numenorian skirmishers are pretty handy in melee as well, of course. Helmingas. Much of this engagement actually is being coloured by how good your archers are in melee. Right on the other side, they have now moved across the bridge, and again, Cardolan, maybe gaps have made themselves apparent. Dunedain Rangers, surely they've used up their ammunition. If not, then this is again another pretty serious skirmish of Cardolan to have lost at this stage. They'll hold their own in melee against Dalian Spearmen, and perhaps with a bit of support from the gatekeepers they can push them back. But also the interesting thing here, I mean, you can understand why Cardolan took up the position they did over here, because being on this side of the hill took away the ability of Dale to do easy damage with their archers, but in so doing now, of course, Cardolan are having to fight up a mild hill, but those sharpshooters firing into the flank is going to do a hefty amount of damage. Panzer forces evenly matched. Defeat a distinct possibility. Cardolan sharpshooters, a second unit of them getting into place, and I mean, why not? You won't find a finer blob of units to fire into, I suppose, and at this point Dale are starting to leak through, and with how chaotic things are, you really don't want to be swamped over here, because otherwise a lot of your units are going to end up being killed off in an engagement which is far from ideal for you. So I think so far the attackers overall will be pretty pleased with how this has gone. What about Zelhane's force? So he has moved into the kill box. moving some of his units back out of it, however. And again, broken and fighting to the death. So could that be as a result of some skirmishes? I mean, they're still in formation despite the fact that they're broken and fighting to the death, so I guess that speaks to their discipline. Though of course when a unit is broken and fighting to the death, their stats are basically non-existent, so it's only good in so much as they are a momentary distraction, and they're not a distraction for anything at this stage. Rohan bow, so the elves getting involved now, going after the gatekeepers who have pulled out their pole arms now, so they must have used their ammunition. Continuing crossbow fire. This was the unit that, well, as I say that, one of the Dalian generals falls, the one facing off against Numenor. We'll go over there in just a second. The Glade Guard must have been a hidden unit as well. I mean, Elven Shock Infantry is always going to have a little bit more finesse about it. And that will be of great help against the kind of units they're having to try and push their way through here. Hammer Guard. Arthedain Marksman. Still firing away, but certainly you would say that Dorwinion are the ones in the ascendancy here. This front line still holds for Numenor. The attackers have thrown a good deal into it at this point as well, albeit you can see that they did manage to get their Earls of Dale in behind the line to cause some disruption. And they will of course fall now as we see it, but preventing those Numenorian archers from doing the business for any length of time is a worthwhile endeavour here. The Shield Maidens, what sort of angle are they going to find? Not an ideal one, but they are going after the Pharazim Swordmasters, trying to whittle down their mighty hit point count. And the Numenorians have got the edge in this engagement now again. The quality and also the fact that stuff like the Seafarers are also pretty good hybrid units when it comes to their melee abilities, so they might be able to weather this. They've also managed to hold on to this position as well, which I think is pretty key. If they'd managed to push through over here, they would have had to divide their attention a little bit more, Numenor, but the attackers weren't able to make that happen, so not a bad thing. Blackshot Dragon Slayers, where the general has fallen, of course. There's still a small matter of that Rohan cavalry. But how useful is that going to be if this infantry assault totally falls flat? So far the most effective infantry assault has probably been this one from Dorwinion. Victory still seems certain for them. Morroquendi Pikes are on the front line. Their supporting units have been better. They've managed to make dents where their allies have not. Vanguard nibbling away at this unit of Cardolan sharpshooters, making their lives uncomfortable as well. Arthedain Man-at-Arms, Morroquendi Stalker, so there was Hidden Horse Archers. I mean, that's a nice hit there from the Arthedain Trebuchet. And at this point, when you're losing an engagement like this, spinning the roulette wheel and using your artillery near your own men is not necessarily the worst thing to do, because you're far more likely to get fairly significant hits like that one, and especially that one actually, because that would have hit a decent amount of Elvalin Hammer Guard, who of course are such a dangerous unit themselves. Grey Company taking hits from the Elven Horse Archers. The Grey Company do not have that armour score really to be able to stay there for any length of time. Incredibly damaging, but also pretty fragile. Arthedain Man-at-Arms, in terms of sheer numbers, can try and swamp the Hammer Guard, but one-to-one, they'll scarcely find an opponent they would less like to face. But the front line for Arthedain is also pretty much gone. I mean, the Gatekeepers are still a significant hurdle for the attackers to overcome, but they need this good news, because elsewhere the Numenorians are doing the business on the other side. But also another position the attackers will be fairly happy with is this one, because Dale are making progress over here against Cardolan. Cardolan doing damage to Dale for every bit of ground they take, but it's ultimately not going to be enough to stymie their momentum at this point, I would say. Nice charge though. and that is something that the defenders have been able to do. They have been able to utilise their heavy-hitting cavalry, more so Cardolan and Arthedain than the Numenorian variant, at least from what we've seen. Black shots, Horns of Tir Gorthad overrun, including by the Dalian Paladins. All of the Dalian army, aside from... actually no, that's Cardolan and Dorwinion units. Farazon falls though. I mean, the Hearthguard are chasing down this cavalry, but surely this isn't going to work because they can be pulled around by the horse archers and then charged by the Glade Lords. They are spears, but down come the lances. The Hearthguard's sheer survivability there meant only one of them actually died, so maybe this will work in terms of a value proposition, but they're very isolated at this point. And the rest of their force will follow. Earls and Red Shield. So yeah, Dale and Rohan will still have their fast movers over here. I think if Numenor are to be completely victorious against the footbound units that are over here, they probably should think about pulling back, supporting the Arthedainians. Speaking of which, that was the Arthedain general by the looks of things, based on the announcer's allegiance. Although I'm not entirely sure. Where was his general? Was his general in this one unit of spears that he had on the front line? That is a crazy choice if that's the case. Or is was the general in the Knights of Numenor, which is a little bit more typical. I mean, the general's model should still stand out a bit, but maybe he's underneath all of these Dorwinion units. And those Morroquendi bows are going to prove to be a little bit of a concern. Going after the Troll Slayers. Poison projectiles not so much the problem, but Elven arrows are still going to deal a fairly hefty amount of damage. Now the artillery turns its attention to Dorwinion, as well it should, because a blob is quite likely to form, and that was a very good initial hit on Zelhain's advance. There is a case for saying though that Zelhain should be a little bit more cautious at this point rather than sending all of his units forward in a big blob, because his allies are making progress elsewhere, and Arthedain is going to have to divide their attention to stop the Dorwinion and inevitable Dalian presence. How much of them? I mean, it's going to be a relatively skeleton crew. I'd say maybe victory should still be given to Dale over here because of the presence of those paladins. And there's Thorlad Warhammers though going to town on this unit of Barding Herd, so I still think Dale will be victorious over here, but maybe it will be by a finer margin than I was initially thinking. Stalkers still very much doing their thing, bullying those gatekeepers. Dunedain Rangers with axes out. Going to try and hem these guys in. More interested in killing off the crossbows. They'll bulldoze their way through without doubt. So yeah, this could be fairly key actually between Dorwinion and Arthedain here in the middle, because whoever gains the upper hand, Numenor is going to be victorious on one side. They'll be able to reinforce. Dorwinion and Dale should be victorious, but they're going to be pretty well damaged. So whoever wins this could give their team the ascendancy in this fight. We will see. Numenor already sending some of their units back across. Content to... I mean, the Lords of Arthedain, they're depleted. They probably will be overrun by the Earls of Dale, to be honest. The Numenorian cohort are here. The Dwarven Catapult crew has routed. A routing dwarf. How often do you see such a thing? And I think the Rohan cavalry, I mean, the Glade Masters are here. Red Shields, the Metacell Guard are still completely healthy. I mean, perhaps that was the decision that was reached, like it was obvious they weren't going to win, so the cavalry and the Rohan general is going to reinforce one of their allies rather than being thrown against the Numenor line to perish in the manner that many of their units ended up doing. Trollslayer's still wheeling around looking for an angle. Arthedain pulling back, but where to? Gonna move over here and then they can... Again, it's a very long route they could take, but they can move back up to here. Then to the back end of the settlement. I suppose the final stand would be over here. You can set up a little crossfire as well. But it's a long road for everyone to take. There's actually only one path up to it as well, by the looks of things. Albeit the I mean, technically this trebuchet is actually fine, even though I don't know if this is... Oh no, this is an area you can reach. Yeah, the trebuchet sliding off the hill. This could be pretty key as well. Sons of Aeol running around behind enemy lines. I mean, this is a position that was already largely secured. The High Lords are over here as well. It's going to take a fairly significant unit to defeat them. I think they are caught up here though, aren't they? I don't think there's a way down. Indeed there isn't. That means there is only one way in as well, so all of their enemies for the time being will have to face them from the front, and being such a strong unit, they will take quite a while to be whittled down. I need something with a little bit more power to be able to beat them as well. I know the pikes are there, but something with a little bit more quality to give them a hand as well. So what are Dorwinion going to do now? Stalkers are in behind enemy lines, the spearmen chasing them, but shaken. The charge coming in from the Knights of Illuminus. There are Vanguard in here, but against basic units like this, as long as the charge lands, it should still be pretty effective. Up here, Arthedain men-at-arms. Still some Elves of Dale making a nuisance of themselves, which, considering the defensive position Numenor had, they have, I mean, technically speaking, they've got their archers in position. I mean, this is a heavily depleted force. I mean, the good thing about this is the final stand being along this route. Numenor being victorious means that Rohan Dale will not be able to cut off the path that leads back up. Is there another way up? I mean, there must be if there's cavalry here. Is it this way? Ah, yes. Okay, fair enough. That's a more direct route than the one that the others are taking, which does leave the cavalry open to completely scupper this idea. Still, you got those armour-piercing arrows coming in, hitting the Sons of Aeol. The Trebuchet of Numenor crew in the way with their warhammers, but all of these guys are going to circumvent. The Glade Lords are pretty depleted after their encounter with the Hearthguard. They're still dangerous enough and charging into the wards of the north to try and silence those steel bows of the modern age, and then you've got the steel bows of the previous age here as well, taking some hits from those elven horse archers. Further afield, still got those Arthedain marksmen out on their vantage point. It's very, well, I say that as soon as they run out of ammunition and draw their secondary weapons. Which is a bit of a shame because, well, I say that, the Hammer Guard have taken some losses. 18 of them, though, is not insubstantial as the battle wears on. And there's still... I mean, this bit of resistance is going to be outright victorious as well, so this could be a little bit of a wild card with some Rangers, some men-at-arms, and then of course the High Lords as a small squad of units that can potentially make life uncomfortable for the attackers as they do their thing. What's left of Dale, having been victorious against Cardolan, it was a real back and forth, but Dale did have the better end of the engagement over here. But how effective is the remnants of their force now going to be? I mean, technically speaking, this area for the final stand at the moment, at the very least, is partially occupied by the attackers. But they're not going to be able to hold on to that with the entirety of the Numenorian and Arthedainian army on the way to reclaim it. Steel bows. Arms and cohorts. Sending the occasional pot shot downrange with the wind lances a Dale, but not deterring Arthedain from continuing to retreat. But as they have retreated, of course, it does mean that Zelhane's Dorwinion force is fairly healthy, relatively speaking. There's a lot of units that they're still going to have to face later on. Like any bows, Glade Guard, still the Glade Lords somewhere, is there not? Yeah, the Glade Masters, rather. Still completely healthy. It's a very significant unit to have later on. Seafarers, and also it's worth saying that the Numenorians and Arthedainians are probably going to have very little in the way of ranged resources left. Much of their ammunition surely was spent in the outer layers defence. Cavalry has been forced back, but they continue to be a nuisance. Each of these arrows that hits an enemy is a very useful thing for the attackers to really try and push home that edge they have in terms of numbers. There's a live Dalian general there. I believe as well, yes, the Rohirrim general. Sons of Aeol, how useful are they going to be? I mean, 24 of them is significant, but again, final stand is an awkward time to use shock cavalry. There was still the Medicel guards skulking around somewhere as well, was there not? Swordmasters. Hearthguard of Amon Sul is still alive as well, so they didn't get finished off. That was the Arthedain general? So who was the allied general that fell earlier on then? Because it wasn't Cardolan. Must have been one of those. The announcer must have just assumed that there was a force on the side they weren't. Seafarers of Nindamos on the front line. I mean, instantly those river patrol routed. Any batches of units they can get rid of at this point, the defenders will be of great use to them. Paladins getting into melee as well. I mean, that's a high quality unit indeed, but there's not many of them and they need more units around them. They and the Black Shots are strong enough, of course, but Farazim Swordmasters in response and sheer numbers, the only support they really have are the Morroquendi Stalkers. Was that jumping the gun a little bit there? Their allies are certainly not in a position to begin the attack yet. Dorwinion are miles away from being able to attack from the other direction. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul and the Dunedain Rangers, and then there's the Arthedain Man-at-Arms being chased by another unit of Elvelyn. The High Lords, I mean, this is a significant clutch of units which is essentially surrounding what remains of Bosnian's Dale army. And they may be outright victorious over here now, but this is the ideal time for the Sons of Aeol to actually get their value off. Charging into the Dunedain Rangers. Because the Hearthguard are somewhat wrapped up anyway, so they need to try and get those lances down to do the damage to the High Lords. That will be the key. Arthedain Man-at-Arms fleeing now, routing, seeing the cavalry coming towards them. This is just going to buy a little bit of time for their more important units to get the business done against these Swordmasters. Defeat seems certain for them. Seems like an obvious statement, but... And then the Hearthguard, I mean the Hearthguard need to be the ones really to try and get in the way of these cavalry charges. They've already proven to be a bit of a pain for the attacking cavalry so far. Sort of terrain though, it's not the easiest place to build up to charge speed. It is possible, but it's one of those things where you're kind of at the mercy of what Medieval 2 thinks is enough room for them to get their lances down, which they did that time. And some of those rangers do go flying. There's not many of the Hearthguard left either, but they are the danger to the riders of Theoden. There are some Hammerguard moving in now, and the reinforcements from the Alvalan infantry is going to make this a more even-keeled fight. That's going to continue, but what wasn't a particularly even-keeled fight was the Dalian attack over here, and indeed the Paladins and the Black Shots alone were not enough, because there are bodyguard tier units from the defenders as well. They also have plenty of support around them. Those units over there taking the long way around. I mean, that was part of the concern with retreating here in the first place, but the distance that Dorwinion needs to cover has actually proven to be maybe one of the most significant edges the defenders have been granted here, because by the time Dorwinion arrives, there's not really going to be much of an attack happening from the other side, so the defenders will be able to fully focus on what Zelhain has left. Defeat seems certain. Hearthguard of Amon-Sul coming back, trying to maybe bait the Sons of Aeol in. Still 17 of them. I mean, they're on the clock here, the Sons of Aeol, because the High Lords of Numenor are inevitably going to defeat these Elvalan in this little fight. Have the position, and again, maybe once the Elvalan have been defeated and there's actually more open space, maybe then those lances will find their mark. And there goes the Dorwinion general in that blob. There goes another general, that'll be the Dalian one. So 2 attacker generals falling in quick succession here. Whatever happened to the Medicel Guard? Still like red arrows all over the place, but that's probably routing units down there. There are the Medicel Guard, how perfect. They're going to be marching in step with Dorwinion, Morroquendi bows, Glade Masters. There is a lot of quality bound up over here, something that we have seen already used to good effect with the Elven Horse Archers, and now the red shields late on, but in a more... There's not really enough scope to really use the mobility of the Horse Archers here, so maybe the window for them being super effective as closed, but even the fact if they have ammunition, that could prove to be vital to the attackers' chances now. Looks like the ones in the north just ran out of ammunition. That could also be a bit of a saving grace for the attackers. Ultimately, there's only so much ammunition to go round, and the defenders have had to be quite liberal with its use. Some Morroquendi Stalkers doing their thing, but immediately getting carved down by the Troll Slayers. And when they come forward, I mean, surely that'll be the end for the Sons of Aeol. The High Lords of Numenor can then take their place in the main defence against the inevitable attack from Dorwinion over on the other side. Still a few Hearthguard as well, 15. And in terms of the late game, these are still significant units when it comes to these high-end options. Taking the occasional hit now from the front. As the Morroquendi bows start to do their thing, but again, with how solid the defence is, the morale debuff from the poison arrows is not going to have the morale busting effect that it might later on, but there's not a huge amount of numbers left from the defenders, and that may be the difference here. There's a lot more mass for Dorwinion, or at least enough more mass to be significant, but the quality, Warns of the North, Steelbow's still with a bit of ammunition, and these Seafarers presumably do as well if they're taking up a position there rather than near the front line. And then once the victory is secured, now they are leaving once more the Sons of Aeol maintaining themselves for the moment. Still 10 of them remain, which, to be fair, it does mean that one unit at the very least is going to have to be used to guard this path, otherwise the havoc they could cause would be pretty significant. But it's unfortunate for the attackers, really, that this attack gets underway as soon as the remnants of the attack from the other side has been completely cleaned up. And that's usually the sign that the defenders are onto a good thing. But we'll see. That's a vicious volley from the Seafarers. And going after a key unit as well in the Glade Masters, but there's not really many options for Dorwinion at this point in the ways that they can approach this. Medicell Guard are way too far back, in my opinion, at this point. Like, infantry, I can understand why the Red Shields are going that way, because they're going to try and help put the pressure on the other side, but there's no purpose in saving your Medicell Guard all the way back there at this point. Like, if you want to be the last one standing on your team, that's fair enough, but that's not really a grand accolade to have. You could even view it as quite the opposite. Troll Slayers making their way back, another significant unit, even if they don't have any Javelins remaining. They're going to be pretty darn good at doing some hefty damage. The Javelins... And that is one thing, of course, the Seafarers don't have the most in the way of ammunition, so simply to soften the enemy up as Dorwinion collide with an Arthedain-led front line. See, this was the engagement that was happening initially, but it was the one that took the longest to get underway, so this is more a continuation of the box-shaped engagement we saw earlier on. And who will get the edge? Still the support coming in from those Morroquendi bows. Arthedain shadow bows. What remains of them? Getting involved in melee as well, and the Horns of the North. That is a significant unit to still have ammo as well. They're going to be fairly safe up here to gain their kills, and then later on you'll have some bodyguards here units to join the melee as well. And at this point it's hard to see beyond a defender victory, to be honest. We're not even in the final 10k frames yet, so presumably there's still some twists and turns to come. You can see the Troll Slayers are being used as the marshalling unit back here. They do still have their Javelins as well, so if the cavalry was to come forward, they'd get last samurai'd pretty fast, considering the amount of damage they can dish out. High Lords of Numenor as well. I mean, yeah, it is mostly Arthedain that remain. There's a few Numenorians as well, of course, including the mighty Pharazim Swordmasters, but obviously the Numenorians, relatively small army. Their victory earlier on did certainly take its toll as well. Vanguard moving forward, there's Morroquendi bows shuffling backwards. If they still have ammunition, that's fine, but if they don't, they may as well be sent in to try and keep this engagement going as long as possible. There's not really any sort of subtle way of doing this at this stage. Troll Slayers getting up onto the hill, so they're going to try and use their Javelins up here. I mean, finally the Medicell Guard seem to be moving forward, but by the time they arrive, the Troll Slayers probably would have already tanked this Dorwinion front line, so it might be too little too late. What's going on over here? Cavalry still. A Morroquendi Stalker, as well as all of those Red Shields. Red Shields presumably still have ammunition, which is something else they have going for them, but they have completely abandoned this defensive position, which is bold. Troll Slayers, I mean, these Javelin volleys could be pretty terminal for this Dorwinion front line. At this point, it's an absolute necessity that the Sons of Aeol and the Red Shields manage to get some hammer and anvil strikes, because that's really the only way that the attackers can fight their way back into being competitive in this one, I think. Morroquendi bows are all well and good, but they're not going to be able to do damage on the same scale that the Troll Slayers are going to be doing into that blob. And morale could start to become an issue for Dorwinion as well. High Lords of Numenor. Getting towards the front line, I mean they are going to... Are they going to get a rear charge? Ooh, revealing themselves as the Troll Slayers, an ambush. But it doesn't really change what they need to do. I mean, only 2 of them managed to get into there. They managed to land their charge, but the key is going to be the red shield, surely. A charge in the back is necessary now. It's all well and good getting these kills with your arrows, but speed is now of the essence, really. I'm impressed with the Dorwinion front line's resilience against the kind of force they've been faced with. Guard don't have the same angle as the Troll Slayers, but they will still get some kills by doing this, but whether or not it's going to make the difference. They're going to move forward, but now they're also going to get caught in the crossfire between 2 units of Troll Slayers. I mean, the red shields are a tanky unit, Force Archers. Goes the Rohan General. He was in the red shields. The same exact model is by default a part of the Sons of Abel, but that is the final attacking general. That does explain why the red shields were used a little bit more conservatively if the general was a part of it, but again, Horse Archers need to be active, so I don't know if it's necessarily the best place for a general unless you're talking about one of the multiple HP versions, Glathram Riders and Chieftain's Vanguard from Cand and the like. Smash the enemy. I mean, the Medicel Guard are now in melee. Final unit being committed to melee, these Morroquendi bows. And it's just going to be a case of sheer attrition at this point, unless the red shields can really make something impressive happen. But they've taken losses now, so as a Horse Archer unit, mass is their main vector for dealing damage off of a charge, and they're also being forced back, really, by the Troll Slayers. Still bits of damage coming in from those Arthedain up on the hillside as well. The advantage of being a heavily depleted unit is your ammunition seems to last longer. Yeah, these Troll Slayers have been very important in the late game. Arthedain's strength that they still had, Wardens of the North and the like, proving to be too much. Also the shape of the map as well. Obviously when you're talking about that sort of thing, it's often fates that really makes the difference there, but Dorwinion electing to go that way, slow marching around, and Dale deciding for some reason to attack immediately. It's that sort of disjointed mindset which can really cost you as the attackers, and I think that has proven to be the case here. The initial defences as well really did make the attackers pay for what they took. I mean, Numenor were outright victorious on their side, of course. Arthedain, the fight against Zelheim was kind of an even kilter, really, because neither of them really fully committed to that. But the other one against Warlords, Dorwinion Force, the attackers did get through, albeit very depleted, and it was the same story with the Dalian army facing off against Cardolan. They were victorious, but it really did cost them. And just making the attackers pay dearly for every bit of ground they take can often be the key in these 5v3s, as well as limiting the amount of significant losses you take. And it started well for the attackers in that regard, managing to swamp that one unit of Cardolan sharpshooters. Red Shields have managed to get around, however. What are they going to do? Are they going to charge? They need to charge the... it looks like they're going to go after the shadow bows, but, like, to be honest, like, you need to clatter into the back of this infantry at this stage. You need to do a lot of damage quickly, and killing off these 12 guys up here isn't really going to do it for you. You will finish them off, of course, and it will prevent some of those fire arrows from going in, which at this stage, you can see that some of the regular Elvelin are thinking about fleeing. I do like the look of the red shields and the Westmark Marshals, the like red Rohirrim armour and the helms. It's a neat look. So they are going to kill them off, but by the time they do so, will they have enough time to get down here and get a rear charge? One thing that has helped this front line, I think, obviously the arrival of the Medicel Guard with their quality has, but also the fact that you've got quite a few Elven units in here with that better melee defense is going to be useful. There's one Arthedain Shadowbow falling now, but they need to make their way down here quickly. There are a few pikes in here, but I don't think they're going to want to peel them off the front line necessarily. Or Glade Guard. Victory is a distinct possibility on that side of things, but surely as the High Lords make their way to the front line, that's going to change up a little bit. But yeah, rear charge here could make the difference still. Will the Red Shields be able to turn this around for them? They need to line themselves up, and they need to be, well, I mean, not now, the Troll Slayers have peeled themselves off the front line and are going to act as the rear guard, although to be fair, ammunition, it's not going to be quite as barnstorming as a charge would be, but it also keeps your units out of harm's way. And more of a defensive horse archer though, is this going to be the kind of DPS that can turn this fight around? Down to a very fine margin this. I could have sworn there was one unit of Troll Slayers that was marshalling that unit of Red Shields. Don't know what happened to them. Whatever did happen to them. At this point is unimportant because this is the situation that faces both sides now. I think a big part of what's going to happen here is whether or not some of the rank and file Elvelyn can hold their nerve long enough to keep these numbers up. There's also simply more bodyguard units in here for the defenders. The Horns of the North, the High Lords are so difficult to kill off even in this situation. The Medicel Guard are strong of course, but they're the only ones in here of any sort of numbers of a bodyguard unit. I think there's still some Glade Masters, but they were obviously heavily damaged by the javelins before they even got into this fight, and this fight's been going on for quite a while now. So yeah, now the charge, out of ammunition, all arrows having been spent. They do charge in there, but the Troll Slayers are going to overlap, and you can see that was actually the cue for the Steel Bows to push their way through the line, which maybe should have happened slightly sooner, because surely now they can surround the front line as it is, and that melee defense is surely going to tank. Again, a hopeful rally in the late game for the standard men of Middle-earth, but I don't think it's going to be enough ultimately for them to reverse their fate unless they've got some manner of unit hidden in the backfield. There is again, there's Blackshot Dragon Slayers over here. Do they still have ammunition? Unless White Dolphin has crashed or something, that's always a possibility. Again, there's only 10 of them, so I don't think it would have been too impactful, especially seeing as they wouldn't really have had a good angle to get any shots off from over here. And if they'd have run around to the other side, they would have taken so long to get there that it wouldn't have made much of a difference either. But finally, this brave resistance that the primarily Dorwinion force had as they marched towards the final stand is going to be ended. There's actually some of the Elvelyn that are the last ones left. Broken and fighting to the death they may be, but the last ones left standing and wielding their weapons in the correct direction. 9 Troll Slayers taking point. And there we have it. Finally the Dorwinion general is killed. Having a look at the differences, yeah, but within 2, by the time this ends, this Could remain that, or it could be stretched to 3. Kind of depends on how many units the black shots are able to kill off. What else is over here? Still some red arrows. Oh no, the Dwarven Catapult crew, which is routing on the spot. One Dalian Royal Guard, who is firing at something. Firing at a Numenorian unit, I think, which is also routing on the spot. Yeah. So yeah, that's a sign I think that Blight Dolphin probably did crash before the end of this one. 11 extra bodyguard units wouldn't really have made the difference, though. Like I said, if they were like full ammunition black shots, maybe, if they have gone into the right position, but we know they're not, because this was the first general to fall on the field today, so they've been involved in combat and using their black arrows for ages, really. So we may as well actually go fully up to ×6 speed at this point, because it's simply a case of getting these units on the front and finishing them off. Is shooting at the targets that are right in front of him now, I suppose, and actually landed a hit. Dalian Royal Guard are a very tanky unit. We'll see how long he can... well, not very long at all, but then I suppose the Troll Slayers are very deadly as well. Over here... Blackshot Dragon Slayers. Going to be the next to face off against the Troll Slayers, who have, I think, as a single unit been the most significant one in the late game. Warding off that cavalry. Doing damage with the javelins and also being a stalwart melee combatant as well. All key factors. March towards the inevitable conclusion here. Yeah, it's going to be 3%. Not enough kills are going to be scored by the last stand of the black shots for this battle to be turned around. Victory seems certain though for them in this little engagement. Is that the Troll Slayer's reward for being so useful? That they get hacked down by these bizarre looking weapons from the black shots? I mean, the steel bows are coming in to give them a hand, and surely in terms of sheer numbers now, that's going to be that. But yeah, very, very similar to the last battle in terms of broad strokes, where it was the elves on the defence against the orcs and the wild man. Similar sort of layout in this one, albeit I think this time around verticality was more of a key for the defenders' victory. They were able to make use of superior terrain and of course their quality, but the quality gap was not quite so big here. Neither was the, at least on an individual army basis, the numbers of, because it's a 5v3, that gets warped even further, but in comparison to the elven settlement we saw last time, this one was significantly more about the vantage points that the defenders were able to take up, as well as, of course, just having those edges in melee. As far as what could the attackers have done to turn this around, I think it's kind of hard to say, really, because I think in some places they seem to be gaining the upper hand, especially on the side of the map where Cardolan were. I think over here against the Numenorians, the attack where Rohan and Dale, it looked for a while like they were going to make some inroads, but in the end didn't quite make it. Maybe there was more of an opportunity to use the Shield Maidens on that sort of steeper slope over there to get good hits, and then they could have rushed forward and made life much more difficult for them over there. But I think it's fine margins here, because I don't think the attackers needed to do too much different. The only thing I would say is Dale, when they attacked way before their allies were ready over here, when you're that disjointed, like he obviously got completely wiped out before Dorwinion were ready to attack from the other side. Dorwinion still would have had to face the lion's share of the defence, but if they had joined themselves up and attacked at the same time, I think the attackers probably would have won, because they would have had infantry. The Rohan cavalry wouldn't have had to get involved in that awkward fight against the Hearthguard and the High Lords. They would have had more of an opportunity to use the Red Shield's projectiles earlier. They still used them well, of course, but by that point it was very much an uphill battle for the attackers to try and pull it back from there. So that was the main thing, I think. But early on, not too much could have been done differently, I don't think. Again, it's just small things like when to commit certain units could have been slightly polished up, but when you're getting into the minutiae like that, it can be a difficult thing to really quantify. Let's see what did the damage for Numenor. Royal Legion of Armenelos did very well in melee. 392 kills is no small feat. Shadow bows, of course, Balaguer archers. Steel bows with less, but that's because they have less ammunition. Seafarers were significant late on, because some of those admittedly lower kill counts, but that included the Glade Masters. And yeah, the Shadow bows, of course, on that vantage point early on, were in a good position along with the Royal Guard. Pharazim Swordmasters, less kills perhaps than you would expect, but still not bad. Numenorian Cohort, 313. Lords of Arthedain, probably the least impressive of all of the defending cavalry. The Knights of Numenus and Royal Court of House of the Rondor got some more telling charges. The Lords of Arthedain maybe slightly less so, but they were still, decent at maybe quashing any sort of attempts from the Earls of Dale, for example, to do the same to them, which can be just as valuable. It just doesn't give you a number at the end. So yeah, the sword and shield units did very well, as well as the archers did. So yeah, not too surprising there in terms of what Numenor are all about. So yeah, big thank you to the Womb Raider for this one once again. I'm still not sure, I think there's 3 maps, and I'm pretty sure the last one and this one was given to me by the Womb Raider and was made by him. There's another one which I think, as part of this collaborative effort, the 3rd one in this little series that we show was made by Mevon. I think that's the case. If I'm wrong, I'm sure that they can correct me in the comments section. But that's the vibe I get. But yeah, obviously, new maps, always a good thing. And obviously it's very much the same. It's always good when someone else gets involved with this sort of thing, because obviously new maps are always a good thing, especially for me. So yeah, I think that's... The Womb Raider definitely put the game on and was definitely responsible for creating this map, I believe. Whether he had help or not, I don't know. But yeah, big thank you to him. Big thanks to all the players as well for being a part of this battle replay. As far as what's going to be coming up next, it could be that one from Mevon. I did get a scenario from Tommy, which I was part of the first attempt to run it, but it crashed near the end. But that same scenario is now done and complete, so that one might be next, and then we'll do Mevon's new map afterwards. And then there's a few others, like the Harad Capital, Thranduil's Halls. There's a few from way back in the summer that I still need to get to as well, so there's plenty of other things, but obviously new maps and new scenarios always take priority because it's completely new content. So yeah, on that note, big thank you to the Womb Raider and all the players once again. Hope you enjoyed this, and hope you'll join me for whatever is next.